We think women need to talk more openly about money because money really matters. It shouldn't be embarrassing or confusing. Join the conversation. We'll be discussing a whole range of topics which will help you get comfortable with your finances. Money Matters. Brought to you by AJ Bell.
Hi, and welcome to the AJ Bell Money Matters podcast. I'm Laura.
And I am Danny, and this episode is all about love. Well, relationships anyway, with a partner, with our money.
Yeah, we always try to talk about things that are in the news that matter to all of you. And since it's just been Valentine's Day, it seemed like a good time to find a couple of special guests who could shed some light on what it's like not only to live with your partner, have kids with them, but also start a business with them, which frankly is not something I would do with my husband. I will live with him and I will have a child with him, but the business part is a no-no for me.
Well, just COVID, having to suddenly be in each other's pockets all the time, both of us working in the same house, we had to have demarcation lines because, you cannot come in the kitchen to make a cup of tea because I'm using the kitchen table. You cannot come in the living room to watch telly because I am, it got fraught. And I'm glad we're no longer doing that.
Yeah, definitely. I think it takes a special type of couple and also some very strong boundaries, like you say, Danny, to be able to start a business together and be really successful in that and not let it kind of leach over into your personal life as well.
Yeah, I don't know how you don't end up just talking about, who's going to walk the dog or whose turn it is to pick up the kids when you're coming off the back of quite an important meeting about, the money for the year, the budget. I absolutely have to say that I take my hat off to all couples that work together, especially if they have started a business together, like Claire and Matt Tao. They started the platform Meet Margot back in 2022 from their kitchen table, which again is some feat. The aim was to help more women find mortgage and insurance products that were right for them. And we'll hear more about that and how, as a couple, they make both their personal and their business finances work.
And we always find around big dates like Valentine's Day, you get loads of surveys and data out about the financial habits of couples. And we'll talk a bit more about that once we've heard from Claire and Matt. But also, we get the annual survey about how much people spend. And if you were wondering, Danny, it's £56 on average people spend, according to an opinion survey for ClearPay, on Valentine's Day in total. Do you think you came over or under that budget? I'm going to guess maybe under. Not because you're not romantic.
She adds very quickly. No, we absolutely did. We were way under. In fact, we just bought each other a card this year. But I think that's because we celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary in December. And we kind of did all the, lovey-dovey stuff then.
It's enough romance for 1 year.
Yes, it is totally. Can't cope with more than that. What I did like in that survey, though, was, and it's something that I can totally get behind, and I bet you can too, because 1 in 5 people were going to use the day not to spend money on roses and cash. And I didn't ask you, did you spend £56 each?
Oh my goodness, way under. We did cards. My costs went up by, well, I guess they effectively doubled this year because my daughter now thinks that Valentine's Day is a thing that she should get involved in. So I had to buy her a card to avoid a meltdown on Valentine's morning when she didn't get one. And then I bought sweets for us all to share. So I would say my total cost was probably about £6.
Okay, I like that. Well, what I do like in particular is a lot of people, 1 in 5 people, were going to use Valentine's Day as an excuse to treat themselves. And that 56 quid that was on average how much you were going to spend on your partner for Valentine's Day, well, it was more than that they were going to spend on themselves, 70 quid. I thought that was
I
great.
love this. That's so good.
Yeah, that is something I can totally get behind. And my eldest daughter this year was really loved up. I think she probably spent more than the 56 quid, but there we go, young love. My youngest, a bit like your daughter, was feeling really left out. So she celebrated Galentine's with her gal pals. And I love that because if you are single, Valentine's Day, what it does is just spotlights the fact that you are single for whatever reason, and it's depressing.
I know, I know. It's a tough day, I think, if you're single and you're not happily single, shall we say. But to add insult to injury, the papers also chose this date to flag up that extra issue that we've spoken about a few times on this podcast, which is the single tax. So this is the extra money that you end up paying out because you are single rather than part of a couple. And think, for example, one of the biggies is my favorite topic, holidays. Most rooms sleep two people. There are very few single rooms, and often you will end up paying the single person premium when you go on holiday. So that means your per head cost is more, and actually that can run to a decent amount of money unless you can travel with friends, of course.
That gets a bit complicated when you travel with friends, which is what I did last summer. And it's all well and good until it comes to the sleeping arrangements. And I have to confess that I do snore sometimes. And
Mm.
what I hadn't realized is that apparently I also act out certain sort of charades in my sleep. And apparently, my friend that I was sharing a room with said in the middle of the night, I suddenly decided to start running in bed.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to note this for our next team holiday. Not sharing a room with Danny. Yeah, it's tricky. And I think it's also quite hard to find a friend who's at that same stage of life as you, that wants to go away without a partner and that wants to do the same things as you and the same budget, of course, because you could have people on very different salaries or just very different expectations of what they want from a holiday. So it's not as easily said as just, oh, find a mate and go away with them and split the cost.
No, it's not. But anyone who is single or has ever been single for a protracted period of time and you weren't living at that point with your parents will not be surprised that housing costs is where you can find the biggest penalties for being single. And here we can be talking tens of thousands of pounds over a year if you are paying, say, rent for a one bed flat by yourself, particularly in places like London and the Southeast. And of course, it's not just the rent or mortgage. You've then got to think about heating, lighting, because doing that in a house for one person costs as much as doing it in a house for two people.
And it doesn't end there. You've got insurance costs, streaming services, water bill, council tax. Because even though you get a single person discount on council tax, it's not half the cost that you get off, it's just 25%. So all of these costs end up really adding up to that total single tax.
And think about food as well. That's the bit that always gets me because most products are packaged and they're either aimed at a couple or a family, most often a family of four. You know, you think about those big packets of rice you get now, serves four or serves two. And okay, you can keep a bit of it in the fridge for a while, but it, it just seems all the time that companies are thinking in terms of two by two. You know, the animals went in two by two. We're all buying food two by two. I've got some friends that have got three kids, and they get really cross because if you're trying to feed a family of five, they're hit with some of the same issues. And I know a lot of people, things like takeaways as well. You can get a huge takeaway. And, you know, you could quite happily share that between two of you, but it then gets more if it's just you.
Yeah, exactly. When I lived on my own, I did a lot of batch cooking and a lot of eating the same meal basically for an entire week, because you'd buy vegetables, like you say, and then you'd end up having to use them or eat the same vegetable basically for a week long. So um, there are ways to kind of save on those costs. Batch cooking, for example. Some people, I know of like some older people who club together when they go and do their shopping. And so they'll buy, you know, the pack of apples and then they'll split them between them if they're living alone. So there are different things that you can do, but it is another challenge where you can end up spending more money or ending up throwing away some food because you bought it kind of in bulk for a deal and then not ended up using it.
Yeah, we did a podcast a couple of years ago now with Mimi from Beat the Budget, who is just brilliant at talking about batch cooking and ways to really think about making your money stretch, whether or not you are a single person in a couple or with a family. So it is really worth checking that out.
But single people needn't panic and think, oh, I just need to jump into any old relationship. That is not the solution to it, because that could ultimately create more issues if it doesn't work out, and then you need to split things again. But instead, you can take some steps to live a financially happier life as a single person. So things like budgeting, giving yourself a savings cushion, which is so important if you're single, because you don't automatically have another salary to fall back on should something happen to your finances. And there's always the option of things like generating extra money, whether that's renting out a room by getting a lodger or having a side hustle, or sharing things like those subscription services we talked about earlier, gym memberships, things like that, with a friend or family member. So there are some hacks to try and cut that single tax cost.
Because, as we said earlier, some of the surveys out in the past week or so were also looking into couples' financial habits. And I shouldn't be surprised at all, but one from Wealth Managers RBC Brewin Dolphin found that 1 in 10 couples rarely discuss their finances together, which astonishes me. But then I suppose maybe I shouldn't be so shocked, because previous Money Matters research has consistently found that people do still think of money as a really uncomfortable issue to discuss. And I know that lots of rows, in fact, most of the rows in my house, come from talking about money, whether it be because, I've spent a bit much on my hair appointment, or my husband has spent a bit much on books or whatever. But you can kind of understand why maybe people want to shy away from talking about money. But then, of course, if you don't talk about money, you can just, store up a huge can of worms, which can open unexpectedly at any point.
Definitely. And we know from our previous research that actually for women, not talking about money can end up detrimentally impacting them, either because they end up shouldering more of the financial burden, or because as a couple, you haven't planned out your financial future together, particularly when it comes to things like career breaks for having children, the impact that that has on a woman's pension, for example, how you're going to split those childcare costs. And then also later in life, when it comes to retiring, how much money you have to retire on, when you're going to do that, there's really so much value to be gained from being aligned on even those big picture things, even if you decide to leave aside the day-to-day bickering about who spent what on a takeaway coffee, which is my husband's bugbear with me. We know that women can end up being much better off financially if they start having those tricky conversations, which we acknowledge are not always easy to have, but it's better to rip the plaster off and have those conversations rather than store up a bigger problem for later.
Because I know, certainly in my house, before I started doing Money Matters and learnt from you, Laura, I would end up taking a lot of the sort of unpredictable expenses. So things like school shoes, school uniforms, and that kind of stuff. Stuff that you can't totally budget for, because you can't be absolutely sure when your children's feet are suddenly going to grow, or when suddenly you look at their trousers and think, yeah, there's an awful huge gap between the bottom of the floor and where the trousers sort of start. And I think that that is something that but a lot of women don't take into consideration. It is much easier to be able to budget if you're just paying, the gas bill, which comes out by direct debit once a month, and you know how much it is, than suddenly having to find, you know, birthday presents for 5 different children who your kids are going to a party for.
Oh my God. I think that is my biggest expense at the moment, is presents for 4-year-olds' birthday parties. I'm definitely spending more on that than I'm spending on my own friends' birthday presents, or presents for myself. Maybe I need to take a leaf out of that surveys book earlier and just spend a load of money on treating myself for a day. But one couple who have to talk about money is Claire and Matt Tao. That's because they don't just live together, have a family together, they also started a business together. So Meet Margot was set up to help women get mortgages and insurance products that work for them. It was a labour of love and was set up from the couple's kitchen table, which added another layer of complication. So how do they separate home and work, and how do they make their financial lives work, both at home and in their business? Danni has been finding out.
Okay, well, thanks so much for joining us. Look, let's get to know you a little bit, because you're a couple. You founded a company together. In fact, you set it up from your kitchen table. I'm at the moment sat at my kitchen table. Had you worked together before, Claire?
Well, yes, we have worked together before, but it's interesting because we work from home together. So we've got a remote company of 14 staff. So we're at home together. We've got two young boys together. So we're parenting together. And yeah, we've worked together in a capacity. Matt, you can probably jump in and talk about your career before this that brought us together.
So yeah, no, I previously played sport and moved to Belfast to play for the local team here. Met Claire, and then part of my ex out sport, we set up a couple of coffee shops. We had a drive-through and one sit-in. I was hands-on, and Claire worked in PR, so she helped with the marketing and the PR side of things. We sold one of the coffee shops, closed another one when we got into the financial services, didn't we?
I think when Matt started in financial services, I was on maternity leave, so had two young boys, two under two, and obviously it's a very vulnerable time vulnerable anyway. But when it comes to your finances, I think Matt was starting into feel around in his experience of financial services, and I was on the marketing side of things. And what I could start to see as a young mum of two, and feeling vulnerable about finances and all of that, and not really being the most confident when it comes to finances, I for the first time felt seen, because there was all these women coming through to Matt on social and asking certain questions and being confused about the same things that I felt confused by. And I guess that's where we then started to realize actually we could work together on a more formal capacity. So it was where the idea for Meet Margot came from, in terms of helping more women in home ownership.
So what does Meet Margot do for those people that don't know?
It's all about giving women the confidence to take the next step with regards to their home ownership journey. So from those early days, what we realized was there was all these women reaching out, asking the same questions, being frustrated by the same things. And we kind of took a deep dive into, right, why are they asking these questions? And it's interesting. We started noticing patterns around, okay, there's a lot of people just about to have a baby, or they're trying to move up the ladder, and they've had the baby and they're worried about their finances, or they've just recently become divorced. And when you look at all these patterns and their economic shocks, they're impacting their financial resilience. And when you look at that with regards to home ownership, you absolutely do need handheld when it comes to trying to navigate the property market. And there was nothing out there to kind of help women. So I guess that was our main kind of mission behind, right, let's set up a brokerage specifically for helping women, and regardless of all these challenges that they face. And that's been the core part of why we're doing what we're doing.
Matt, did you feel more in tune with all the women that were coming to you and asking these questions because of what Claire was going through at home?
Yeah, ultimately. And initially we had, I think about 90% of my following were females, and the majority of people reaching out to me initially were females. So I'd go through a lot of stuff with Claire about how to approach it. And as Claire said, it became clear that I knew the finance side of things and the product side of things, but Claire really knew about who we were talking to, how we were talking to them, and why we were talking in that manner. I think there's a financial lack of education in schools for sure, where maths, let's take, for example, we're not taught about interest rates, not taught about buying a home, and it ultimately is for most people, life's biggest investment, right? And outgoing on a monthly basis. So the manner in which we started to talk to people changed, and Claire took control of that. I'd come to Claire and all top line, look, we've had this scenario. And Claire's like, well, why don't we position it in this manner? And it's going to add more value to people. A byproduct of that is we're going to look after more people as a business, but it really is an educational platform that we've done via social media.
I think just to back up what Matt said there, it's about making it relatable. If I think of my own experience, not necessarily confident with finances, would pretty much shut down if I'm being explained a product that I don't really understand, or don't find that I can relate to the person telling me about the product. And so for us, it was, and this all stemmed back to my experience. I was part of a creative agency, spent years within news publishing, creative agency environments, and it was always about putting the consumer first and understanding what really makes them tick. So I think being that young mother, 2 under 2, worried about finances not really relating to them, and looking at, right, actually when it comes into mortgages, I completely just shut down. I have a story from when I was younger, when I got onto the property ladder quite young, and it's just about making it relatable and about breaking it down jargon free and not as intimidating, and that's basically how we've kind of, the success of Meet Margot's really taken off.
Now, one of the questions I was going to ask is, do you play to each other's strengths? But just listening to you two bounce off each other, it's clear that things just work.
Yeah, we've got our separate sides to the business, where Claire's brand, marketing, client success, and I'm more operational, hands-on. But we do have that crossover as well, where we were at an event last week and I was making notes. I'm like, I think these would be really good ideas for educational pieces for social, and then Claire takes that little bit of information and runs with it. So we're sat at the kitchen table now, which is where I usually sit, and Claire's got her office. So we generally have conversations through 3 rooms at times, but we kind of stay in our own lane. But there is a little bit of crossover too.
It's knowing your boundaries, and I mean,
It's
taken time. Don't think that this is just, when we first started out in this journey, it is all consuming to work with your partner every single day, parent together. There's no off button. There really is no off button, and that's why we do like our alone time as well. But we don't get very much alone time. But yeah, I think it's not for everybody. I think you need to know what type of relationship you have, that going into it, if you could work together. And I think that's something that we knew from previous experience of having the coffee shops, and our roles are very different. So we can help each other out when we need to, but it's clear what I do and it's clear what Matt does.
How do you juggle everything? Because as you say, you've got no off time. You're working together, you're working from home, you've got kids together. How on earth do you juggle all of those things?
It's taken time when I was predominantly advising, but we've built a team now of, as Claire said, there's 14 of us, and we're very lucky to have the team that we have, where in essence we've built a business. So on certain parts of the business, they can run themselves from an advice point of view on the mortgage side of things, and then we've got the protection team. But that has taken time, and obviously it's great to build a business and not a job, but there's costs that come with that, and you have to walk before you run at times. But it was 5 to 8 this morning. I was cooking breakfast for the boys, and Claire was talking to me about a CV, and I was like, I've got to focus on the breakfast right now. This is family time. So we say it, we cut it off, and then we bring it back. And we've had times where we'd both be working 11, 12 at night, sat on the sofas, TV's on, no one's watching it, but laptops on our knees. But we've got to a point now where we still have the odd one, but we just understand that we've got to do the work as and when needed, because it can be a stressful situation, mortgaging or buying a home. So we need to have that accessibility for clients.
Yeah, I think tag teaming as well, because you're always going to have that phone call from school to say, right, so and so sick, and it's just having that understanding. So Matt and I would be very, right, listen, I've got more meetings in the diary today, so you go and do that. And it is literally just tag team exercise, and it's something we're quite mindful of, even employing a team, and just that understanding that, especially as parents, you just need that flexibility. Absolutely. For early pickups, stuff goes wrong all the time, and it is what it is. And I think that's one thing that I really take from being a founder, that, I'm really, really glad that I'm my own boss in a sense, because I don't have to be asking all the time that, oh my goodness, is it okay if, and our team knows this as well, that they've got the flexibility there if they need to go and do the pickups, or somebody's not well and they can't log in for today, because we get it. We're going through it every day ourselves.
Now, for couples who don't work together like you do, we wanted to talk to a couple because it's around our Valentine's episode. It's brilliant to have both of you on. So just in terms of making your finances work, because it can be tricky, but clearly because you run a business as well, you have those conversations from a business perspective. So how do you mesh your own finances? Do you have a joint account? Do you have separate accounts? How do you make it all work?
Yeah, no. We only probably in the last year we've gone joint account. So previously, Since working together, we pay ourselves 50-50. So everything's split down the middle. And now in the joint account, it's a bit more official that X amount each month goes in the joint account from both of us, 50-50. All the direct debits are taken from that. It leaves some funds in our own account, for living, doing things we want to do, for investing personally. But the day-to-day family expenses, mortgage, car, things like that all come out of the joint. And then it was a good process, really. We opening up on it. We've got a spreadsheet which details what our expenditure is currently, and then we've also got a target column as well of what we want to review. So little things like add up. But Claire has a Spotify account, and I have a Spotify account. And if we got a family one, it could save a few quid each month. So little things like that. And then we found that I had an Amazon Prime account, and Claire had an Amazon Prime account. So we're like, just by communicating and having the conversations and relaying back to it every month or so, just means that we're not spending money where we don't need to be spending money. And rising costs of living, we're all working as hard as we can to have the lifestyle that we want to have. So we want to make sure that we're not just wasting money in certain areas.
I think as well, having that, bringing it all into one, pre doing that, we probably, I'd maybe cover the childcare, and we'd have clear roles and responsibilities of who covered what, but it wasn't really official. And I think since doing that, there's less kind of, not that we always talk about money, but there's less kind of tit for tat or arguments or anything like that. It just makes it's a bit of a relief nearly knowing that, right, that's going in, and you can clearly see, it's looking a bit tight this month, or, so-and-so's birthday's coming out, and we love a pot as well. So having a pot that is just, birthdays coming up, and just things going wrong around the house, or needing a tire replaced for the car, things like that. But I mean, that's took us a while. We talk about this like we haven't been doing it for ages, but since we have been doing it, it definitely has.
It's been far better, yeah.
How come it took you so long? Because obviously you've been working together for a while. You've got kids together. Why is it only recently that you did that? Did you just not have the conversation before?
No, I think it was just, we were just in a routine with, we knew, right, it wasn't that everybody, both of us knew who was paying what. So it wasn't necessarily, it was just a little bit messier, if you get me. And then we very much just, I think I had a thing with having a joint account as well, because again, from previous experience just of mine, and I just kind of wanted to keep those, even though we have a mortgage together, but in my head, I just kind of wanted to keep them separate. But I think definitely from pulling the finances together, it's
a team approach, isn't it?
It's a team approach, like everything else. So,
but you still have separate accounts so that you can, if you wanted to buy something for Matt and you didn't want him to know, you could do that. And certainly my husband would be horrified if he knew how much I spent at the hairdressers. And yet I know that he's got a car boot full of books because he's obsessed with secondhand books, and I've stopped him from bringing any more into the house. So if we didn't have our separate accounts along with our joint account, it could have some arguments.
I think, and I've seen that happen with friends as well. And I think it's important to have that independence where I know of a month, I've got Matt's birthday coming up, or actually I want to invest more this month. And you're not having to, not that you'd be having to answer to anybody, but I think it's just important to have that little bit of independence. And, that is because you don't necessarily know how much I spend at the hairdressers, but
I don't know how long you're there.
Slow around there.
I'm actually going later today. I get 15 minutes and is everything okay? Where are you? Claire's out for 5 hours. So if we're going by the hourly rate, I think it's a few quid more than me.
So what about if you want to, thinking about investing, thinking about, saving for those bigger things like pensions and stuff, because you guys know all about the gender gaps, that's one of the reasons behind setting up Meet Margot. So what about your pensions and investments? Do you split those sort of 50-50 down the line, or are you coming at it from different positions to start with?
We've got our own investment accounts, but we would talk and say, and we're quite competitive. So Claire, I think Claire's
I'm
Claire's
winning at the minute,
at a higher percentage return at the minute on the
which just
the
backs the
investments.
data about women being better investors.
You went after a lot of women-led businesses, didn't
I
you?
did. I invest in a lot of female-led CEO, and it's paying off.
Yeah, so we would talk about it, and we both say, right, we want to put X amount in of our remaining pot. So it's again, we're open and honest with that. Holidays again, since budgeting better and collectively, we're now creating the pots as well, as opposed to, in essence, been a bit paycheck to paycheck with regards to covering the cost of a holiday. And by booking earlier, you should be making some savings as well.
I think as well on the holiday thing, we have been experiencing just as founders, and I'm sure other founders have got the same thing, but this guilt with booking any time in advance. And I think really it comes down to not knowing, but a year away, what's the business going to be looking like? Like, should we really be taking time off? And obviously, as part of Meet Margot, we recently launched an app to help people through the remortgage process. And we literally, for about a year and a half, we were like, we can't book any leave because we just don't know where that's going to be at or what's going to be happening. And so it was always very this guilt on our shoulders about booking any time and taking time away from the business. And now we've kind of got over that because we're like, the business is more stable. We can take the time off. We need the time off as a family, as a couple, to come back at work and be more refreshed. And yeah, I can't. That is a top tip of mine. Just book the holiday because the business should be still standing when you're back. But yeah, that's my top tip.
So taking time off is a great tip. Have you got any other advice for people looking to set up their own businesses or looking to set up their own business as a couple?
I think it's just having that honest conversation and knowing the type of your relationship. There's no point forcing it if you know absolutely on a day-to-day basis you could not work together, because you really, we work together well, but there is times that it is testing, and it's about not bringing, if there's issues at home, not bringing them into the business. If there's issues in the business, not then bringing that into home. And that is really, really hard to do and to separate those two lives, especially when you're working from home on top of that. And I think the other thing would be that you would back this up as well when it comes to getting investment. So in the early days when Matt and I were trying to get investment to build the app, we had so many doors closed on us because of our status as a married couple. We've been told, regardless of how brilliant your business idea is and how great you are as founders, purely because you're married, we would not invest in you. So a lot of doors closing and a lot of comments.
About the one guy, yeah.
One comment from an angel that, am I in front of me a proper co-founder or just somebody that supports Matt on marketing? And so, yeah, it's having a thick skin for that kind of stuff, and your relationship status, it will come under fire. There'll be a lot of doors closed, and that's okay. They're not your people, so just move on to the next. But that was something we experienced in the early days.
It's been absolutely brilliant talking to you both. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I love that they have it so together as colleagues and yet still have the same issues as any other couple. But did they share confessions, Danni?
They absolutely did, and both were illuminating for different reasons. And before we let you go, we ask everybody when they come onto our podcast for either a financial confession or dilemma. You're clearly competitive. Who wants to go first?
Ladies first.
No, Matt, you go first.
Mine. A recent one for me was we had a load of friends and as couples went to a charity ball, and I'm quite keen to put my hand up in this silent auction and ended up £650 lighter for a weekend away.
No, a midweek stay.
It's a
midweek stay.
And we really struggle for childcare, so I didn't really think it through on the feasibility of it. So if anyone's looking for 2-night stay midweek in beautiful Ireland, just give me a show.
Midweek. Honestly, we're still not recovering over this.
How about you, Claire?
My financial confession would probably be in a past relationship, not taking anything to do with the finances or not holding, just finding it easier to not be engaged on that side of things until it wasn't. And I'd mentioned earlier in the podcast about I'd settled down with an ex-partner quite young. We were in Northern Ireland and we bought a house, so much cheaper over here. And then the financial crash of 2008 happened. We had split up, and financially, the mess that caused, and it took me years to recover. So learn from me, kids. Love and trust are great, but it's not your financial plan. Be, transparent with each other. Be actively involved in your finances. Know what type of mortgage you're setting up. Know how that impacts you. Because you never know when, should things go the other way or a way you don't expect, you need to be able to handle it.
That's brilliant advice. And midweek stay, Matt? No, wait, don't even.
Maybe myself, just go for a bit of R&R.
That's probably why you booked it.
Yeah, I think that's a really important one from Claire, isn't it? In terms of some people who maybe feel that they've been burnt in the past financially, don't want to be so open, but when you find the right person, being open and having those conversations about money that we were talking about earlier will probably prove a little easier.
Yeah, thank you so much to Claire and Matt. What an absolute brilliant couple. And Meet Margot is such a great business. And if you are needing a mortgage or insurance product and, you're a woman wanting an extra bit of help, and that's what they're all geared up for, then do check it out. That is all we have time for this week. But just a reminder that you can find some really brilliant resources on the AJ Bell Money Matters website. We've got articles on the single tax, financial tips for every stage of your life, an excellent podcast about finances and divorce, one about the perils of cohabiting, and one about surviving economic abuse. So wherever you are in your financial life, hopefully we've got material available to help you negotiate that.
And next month is home to International Women's Day, and AJ Bell Money Matters has some very special research on women and finance, so keep your eyes open for that on our social media channels. Just look for AJ Bell Money Matters on Instagram, Facebook and LinkedIn. We've also got a very special guest on our next podcast. Jenny Halpern Prince is a force, founder of her own PR agency and 2 incredible charities, Lady Garden, which helps highlight gynecological issues which can impact women's careers, and Access Aspiration, which gives youngsters a chance at work experience to open doors to their future careers. So definitely join us for that. And until then, thanks for listening.
Before you go, please remember this podcast is for educational purposes, and the views expressed don't necessarily reflect those of AJ Bell. The podcast isn't telling you if a certain investment is suitable or not. Don't forget that the value of investments can change, and you can lose money as well as make it. It's also important to remember that how you're taxed will depend on your individual circumstances, and rules can change. The way an investment performed in the past may not be the same as how it behaves in the future. If you want help, go see a qualified financial advisor.